The thing about Justify My Love, I think this was some sort of contextual shift in Madonna's career. You know, up until that point, nothing had been so blatant and also musically, I believe, so layered. So this sort of turned this pop princess into this fully fledged sexual political adult.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Madonna's Songbook, the podcast about Madonna's music, her great songwriting, and producing talent. I am your host, Giulio Mazzoleni. This is the 7th episode of this podcast, and I think that by now we have gotten to know each other thanks to your comments and your many messages. Please keep them coming. Like you, I am a big fan, as big as the book I have written about Madonna's music. And like you, I like to discuss her music and her talent. I have important news. The publisher, Antigua, has struck a deal with fishpond.com. Wherever you are in the world, through fishpond.com, you can order your book, pay the cover price, and no shipping fee. That's right, free shipment. Get it while their stock lasts at fishpond.com. So here we are once again with a new podcast wanting to make justice of her sometimes underrated music talent in creating a fantastic musical world. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast so you get notified when a new episode is released. If you're watching, it's on YouTube and Spotify as a video. If you're just listening, it's on Apple and Podbean and Amazon and all other platforms of streaming podcasts. Today, we will be discussing specific songs, but I have been getting a lot of requests to discuss other songs as well. Well, I have created a space for that, and it's Madonna Songbook on Patreon. Please subscribe there to get access to exclusive podcasts where I take requests and tell all the details and stories behind the Madonna songs you personally choose. And by the way, you can even win a free copy of my book. Now, let's start today's episode. Without further ado, let's take a journey into Madonna's songbook. Leave all the chatter behind, wanting, needing, waiting to let the music take control. The subject of this episode is Madonna's Seduction songs. We'll discuss huge pillar songs like Justify My Love and Erotica, and then we will mention a list of other songs Madonna has dedicated to sex and seduction. A whole playlist is now available for you to stream on Spotify on my page, Giulio Mazzoleni Madonna Songbook. A link is also in the details of this podcast. But today, we will also give this podcast format a twist, as I have a very special guest who can recount his own conversation with Madonna about music, sex, and seduction. Steve Blame, live from Athens, Greece. Hi, Steve.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm great, and I am honored to welcome you. You know, you've been a great, important person in my musical and language education, because back in the days when I was a university student, I would watch the MTV News from Europe, MTV Europe every day, and you gave me English knowledge, you gave me the news on music, and you also had your witty humor, which I really liked and I admired. So thank you for being a guest on my podcast after inviting me onto yours.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me, and thanks for those kind words. That's really sweet.
It's my pleasure. So let me formally introduce you to the listeners who might not know you or might just know about your MTV experience, because there's so much more. Yes, Steve Blame is a former MTV Europe News host and news editor, but now he's an award-winning screenwriter of TV projects and screenplays. He also is a podcaster of a fantastic podcast, Pop, the History Makers. I think it's brilliant. It has over 100 long-form interviews. You have had incredible guests from the music pop history of the 80s, the 70s, the 90s. For Madonna fans, I totally recommend one of the best interviews Nicki and Donna has ever given. You're also an event and awards show and panel host, and you have interviewed major stars from the last 30 years. I've also seen you on German TV. I remember you hosting Viva channel shows, but also other mainstream shows. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I lived in Germany for 30 years, in Britain for 34, and then I've come to Greece, and I can nearly speak Greek. So my goal is to have another language on television in, or maybe a podcast in Greek, anything. So I'm going to do that here.
Getting to our favorite subject, Madonna, I would like to ask you, as I do with every guest, what is your Madonna experience? I will ask you a few questions to frame your relationship with Madonna. And first of all, please share with us, what are your memories of first hearing her music or finding out about her?
Well, it's really weird because I think it was, in the early 80s, and I'd got a job on a local newspaper from where I was from. I think my brother actually got me the job, and he just got this thing where I wasn't paid, I could just review records. And one of them that they sent me to review was Borderline. But what I noticed, there was something different about this artist. I mean, it wasn't just the music. And of course it was catchy, and there was her energy, particularly right at the beginning, this amazing energy. But she did feel like a disruptor even then. She was sort of challenging the expectations of that you had of, a young female artist at the time. There was something different about her. I don't think, in essence, she was ever really just a pop star for me. She became, in a way, a symbol of rebellion. I think that's one side to Madonna. And also, because of me being gay and, her backing of gay people, it was a sort of symbol of freedom as well. So I think for me, that's what, the first impact that Madonna had on me.
Wow, that's quite enlightening. What is your musical preference in her catalog?
I think it's always such a difficult question when you're asked
Right.
about like what you like and about someone's, musical catalog when it's been so big. So I'm going to start off because I think the first and the early connection that you have to an artist always stays. So I would say like, her maybe early 80s, mid 80s were the Like a Virgin, True Blue, Like a Prayer. I mean, Like a Prayer was a monumental album. It was, this pop, gospel, confessional. It was provocative. And in a way, it had this sort of spiritual feel. And of course, there was a subversive part. But I suppose the real highlights are connected, first of all, to my connection to Madonna, which was Erotica, which we're going to talk about later, I know. And of course, the album that everyone cites as the greatest Madonna album of all time. And I think it's rarely that someone doesn't say that, and that's Ray of Light. And I think that was the album that showed her depth as an artist.
Thank you for that. It is difficult to single point a song or an album, which is why I said, what is your musical preference? What would you relate most to? And I totally understand. So, as we said, besides being a music consumer and a passionate person about music, you also became a professional journalist and reporter and editor. So, what was your perception, or what was the perception at MTV Europe about Madonna in those days? What was the professional perspective on her?
Well, I think there was a sort of pivotal point, really, for me with Madonna. And it was, I'd been at MTV for a few years. And then as the 90s came in, I think then, her being, well, she'd been consistently in the headlines for years, but then it felt like it became mammoth. And also the quality and depth of what she was producing had sort of grown as well, and it had a greater impact. So for me, when we get to sort of the Vogue, the Like a Prayer, which I sort of mentioned before, the Erotica, the Sex Book, and, her work with filmmakers and fashion designers. And it did feel at that point is where she started to push boundaries at every turn. And, you know, I think one of the greatest things that she did was sort of challenge how women were supposed to behave in public. I mean, Madonna didn't behave as society expected in those days, you know, a woman to behave. Wrongly, of course, for the society. And she embraced sexuality, she embraced identity. And in that, she was radical and she was unapologetic. You know, she was just who she was. And of course, that made her a massive polarizing figure. So, you know, I think Madonna, in what she was identifying with and what she was supporting, she became this sort of radical figure. And as someone who worked at MTV and was obviously, you know, fascinated by journalism, which I was, it just felt that Madonna, and some people never like to hear this, but I really think it's true, that she understood the media game better than anyone. And I think it was really down to that she was so intelligent to be able to understand it. And people never really give her credit. They always look upon it as sort of being manipulative or something. But no, she understood the manipulation of the media and she could play that manipulation. Not all the time. It went a bit wrong with Erotica for her. And I think that was, you know, a terrible thing. We can talk about that because the media was so horrendous during that period. But, you know, I mean, that's it for me. She was never boring.
And she still isn't. Incredibly, she has been consistent with everything you just said, even to now. And incredibly, obviously, she's lower down, but she has kept exactly that same bar. Okay, let's go with our first song, Justify My Love.
The thing about Justify My Love, I think this was sort of some sort of contextual shift in Madonna's career. You know, up until that point, nothing had been so blatant and also musically, I believe, so layered. So this sort of turned this pop princess into this fully fledged sexual political adult. In America, I'm not sure if they banned it completely on MTV in America. I mean, it's very difficult because MTV America was much more conservative than MTV Europe because we were going out, you know, to Europe. And although MTV had a young and obviously somewhat underage audience, as well as, you know, people over 16, 18 or whatever, and being, you know, the gay boy at MTV, I was vilified in 1987. I cannot be gay on MTV, and they nearly fired me about 10 times. Eventually, they find out by 92 or 91 that I'm quite popular, and then it was okay to be gay. And so their whole attitude changed, which was, you know, really an odd bit of a brain fuck for me, to be honest. So I'm called into the boss's office and shown, as I was later on with Erotica, shown the video to Justify My Love, to be asked. Suddenly I become the spokesperson of, you know, the gay world and what would have been seen as sort of the allies of Madonna, to decide whether, you know, should MTV play this video? And of course, for both of them, I just went, of course, you know, what are you talking about? Of course, just play it. They never took any notice of me, and I knew they wouldn't really take any notice of me. But it was about them trying to make a bridge to me through Madonna, because I think MTV didn't know what to do, and they didn't really necessarily understand the audience. I think that was a problem. Clearly, I mean, apart from being, you know, a fabulous track, and as I said, very layered, and you know, the video was just absolutely monumental. I think it was incredible. For me, this was Madonna really just blossoming and playing with us a little bit. You know, that corridor thing where she's laughing to herself, you know, about what she's done. There was everything about it was playful and fun. Obviously, you know, it was sexual, and it had, obviously, if it's sexual, it has some sort of political angle as well. And I think this was the moment where she really grew and changed and shifted into, maybe you could call it like an agent provocateur.
Yes, I totally agree with you on that. Steve, for the viewers of this podcast, let me show something. This is the single from Justify My Love. Why am I choosing to show you this? Is that for the nerdy in me, I was so happy when I got this single, and on the label, it says the exact recording date of the song. And so it does with the song on the backside, on the B-side, which is Express Yourself. I thought it was fantastic that the label was sharing this information. And I thought, wow, if this is the first from now on, we're going to get the recording date of every new Madonna song. Unfortunately, this didn't happen anymore. It was just something taken from the label copy on this specific occasion. But again, for the nerdies like me, this is quite important. The song had an interesting genesis. She had taken over control of her production and writing side of her work after, in the first few years, as she was growing as a writer, the label gave her songs and she looked for songs written by others and she would mix this and that. But by 1986, she started writing everything and producing everything she sang, with the exception of Justify My Love, and following that probably Santa Baby for a charity album, and Evita. She has produced everything, with, again, few exceptions.
But that was Lenny, wasn't it? Lenny Kravitz, who came to her.
But this one came from Lenny Kravitz, who called her and said, I have a song for you. It's a #1 song.
He was right.
You have to record it. And she said, well, come over to New York and play it for me. And she was looking for new material for the Immaculate Collection. And in a couple of days, she did record it. And suddenly, it opened a new chapter in Madonna's career, something that had a huge cultural impact outside. But for herself, it spun off her commitment to explicitly political sexual content for many years to follow. Probably the reason why she liked this song was because she was coming from the Blonde Ambition tour, where she was sometimes criticized for being explicit and wanting to provoke debate. And also she was criticized for the lyrics in her previous single, Hanky Panky, which again was very playful. And so she was probably asking herself, what is this thing that is happening? Knowing the media game. If I am explicit, if I am sexual, if I move the barrier, this happens, this reaction happens. Incredibly, it's produced formally by Lenny Kravitz, but I've had the privilege of interviewing Andre Betts, who created the beat and the basic track of the song. And I won't tell the whole story. For people who want to know, they can find it in my book. It was an incredible interview. He's very media shy. He told me the whole thing. Essentially, Lenny did have an intuition because he heard this beat that Andre Betts had created, not sampling, but taking inspiration from a beat from Public Enemy, and then invited over his fiancée of the time, Ingrid Chavez, who was a protege by Prince, a poetress, who read a love letter that she had just written to Lenny over that beat. The one thing that Lenny did was to lay a vocal guide for a melody that was never used and became the BVs, and bring that demo to Madonna. And she understood. She knew what that was. She made minimal changes, although, as I always say, and I want to ask you something right after this, she's a great songwriter to me, even in the little details. In the original lyrics, the song said, I want to kiss you in Jamaica. And Madonna said, I want to kiss you in Paris. It may seem a little detail, but it shows how she knows about pop's relatability.
Yeah, no, it's a nuance, isn't it? It's something that, you know, she knew her audience needed to be able to relate. I just want to take you up on something, because I don't see her necessarily as someone who was a media manipulator in the sense that what comes first is the idea I'm going to create something that causes a stir. I really don't see her in that way. I
Neither
think
do I. Sorry,
this
I
was,
didn't imply that.
okay, this is the first time for me that I feel that she had her full artistic expression on something. And it wasn't just a linear expression, it was something that was much wider. And that's why I think this was, a critical moment.
You said it right. Yeah, I should stand correct. I didn't mean to say that she knows that if she does something, something will happen. She lets her creativity happens, and then she plays the game on
Yeah.
putting that on the tracks.
Yeah, it comes afterwards, I think. Yeah.
The question that I wanted to ask is, do you believe Madonna is a good songwriter and producer? You have interviewed hundreds of musicians of plenty generations, and you know a lot about music. So I really care about your opinion on this.
Well, I mean, I think, well, absolutely, first of all, because I think she's never really been given enough credit for her creative control. And, you mentioned it, that from early on, she was involved in the writing, the production, the concept, but she wasn't really just singing someone else's songs. Even if you look at Like a Prayer, later on, of course, Ray of Light, but they're complex, they're layered works, and you can really see her fingerprints on every element. And I think she has an instinct for collaboration, whether it was Betts, whether it was Nile Rodgers, William Orbit. She surrounds herself with great talent. And that is an incredible talent for an artist to have. You choose the wrong people, you're not going to get the right product in the end. And the other thing is, it's not just about surrounding your people with the talent. You have to have the vision. And Madonna has always led that vision.
Yes. And the fact that she has surrounded herself with so diverse talents throughout her career is the great fact of that is that in every single song, she still sounds like Madonna unmistakably in every single song.
Yeah, because she knows who Madonna is in this moment. I think she knows exactly who Madonna is in the studio. That, like, putting the music together and really fine-tuning all those elements and everything, that's one side of it. But she knows the core, that her voice is Madonna. Sounds stupid, but it's true.
Somebody asked me today, what is the most important element to you of Madonna physically? And I said, her voice. Yeah. This person was expecting me to say, I don't know, her body, her eyes. And I said, yeah, her eyes come second close. And I am obsessed about her hair. But the voice, it's the voice. And in this song, for the first time, she sang with that raspy spoken voice that she would use a lot in the following years. She was experimenting a lot. Lenny Kravitz was in the booth encouraging her to play around. But also there's lyrics from this song that have had a huge impact on her fandom, especially the ubiquitously famous "Poor is the man whose pleasure depends on permission from another." That is generational. I think it's one of the reasons why she saw the lyrics of this song and she said, I will record this, because it's Madonna.
But also it was minimalistic, wasn't it? Also the music, it has this sort of rawness and minimalism to it, which was a repetitive thing later as well within her work. And I think that's something that's very impactful in what Madonna has achieved later on, to do what is, in many ways, the unexpected.
Indeed. Which leads us to the second song of today, Erotica.
Okay. Can I tell you something first? Because I know you're going to talk about the interview, but I want to give you some backstory to the interview.
Okay.
And I think this is important for people to understand contextually the importance of this interview for MTV Europe. Madonna had never done an interview for MTV Europe. All the interviews we showed were from MTV in the States, or from when she was on tour somewhere and Kurt Loder would do the interviews. Mm-hmm. So when this came up, there were a number of people at MTV who were determined to be chosen for the interview and determined to be seen as, I'm the biggest Madonna fan, I want to do this interview. And I thought, fuck that. I'm the managing editor of the news department. I'm the openly gay presenter who had to go through hell sometimes. And I'm going to pull rank. So I explained how important Madonna was for the gay community and that she was one of the very few allies. And, and that I'd been a fan, her whole career of her music. And so it was important for me and for them to allow me to do that interview. It was a good match. And this interview became such a big thing for MTV that
Right.
the hierarchy, everyone wanted to be there.
Well, congrats for achieving that, because it was a monumental interview and it was quite a sophisticated conversation. But first, a little background on the song, how we got to that point. The genesis of Erotica was extremely long, completely differently from Justify My Love, which happened in a moment, and differently from huge songs out like Hung Up, Live to Tell, Like a Prayer, that Madonna wrote and recorded and demoed in one day with one take, never repeating. The gestation of this song was repeated over 8 or 9 months from October 91 in the earliest sessions she had with Shep Pettibone and Tony Shimkin until the summer when she was already mixing part of the album. She was still tweaking and changing this song. And the result that we now have is the combination of different songs, one that we call You Thrill Me, although the original title was still Erotica. Love Hurts, a song that she did with Junior Vasquez, elements from a remix that she was putting onto the Sex album with an exclusive CD, when it all came together into one song. So this, which is one of my all-time favorite songs by Madonna, is the result of chiseled working with an incredible research of sounds and this third-person character narrative that she undertook. And she decided to bring to the world a very complex narration that had her book, her record, the videos, the songs. They were not intentionally meant to come out all together, which caused the huge backlash that we know about for the Sex book. Initially, the book was intended to come out sometimes after the album, but then things got together. And one of the reasons why you got to interview her is that Madonna did her first European promo trip in a long, long time, actually, since her first album, if you don't count Truth or Dare, when she came to the Cannes Film Festival. And therefore, she came to Milan, which is my town, and stayed at a hotel which is around the block. And we joined her at the Gallia Hotel for this interview. Tell me how the preparation was.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, just to give you a sort of more of a bit of a background, at the time I was living with a boyfriend in London who had traveled, he was Australian, and he traveled the world with Madonna memorabilia. He had hardly any clothes, but he had a bag of Madonna memorabilia. No, really. So this would be under the bed. And of course, when he found out I was doing a Madonna interview in Milan, he would have murdered me if I hadn't have taken him. So, and I had a job in Ibiza, so we went to Ibiza and then we went on to Milan. Now, I hadn't heard the music, and this is where it becomes really a difficult thing when you're interviewing someone and you're told you will get a 4-track cassette, because that's what you got at those days. So with a Walkman, you get a 4-track cassette and you're going to get it 2 hours before the interview, maximum. So I'm in the I'm in the hotel room with my boyfriend, and, of course the cassette comes and he grabs it, and suddenly he's like fighting me to listen to this Madonna album. I'm supposed to be doing the bloody interview. So we have this massive fight and eventually come to a compromise where we've both got we're listening it together, essentially. And I mean, it was fun, you know what I mean? It was ridiculous, but it was fun. Now, during that day, while I was in that room, every 10 minutes, someone from MTV would knock on the door and say, she's in a bad mood. She's in a good mood. She's in a bad mood. It just went on. And so my emotions were sort of on a roller coaster, because not only was she the biggest star in the world, but all the heads of MTV Europe had gone on a freebie because they also wanted to meet Madonna. I mean, that's how big she was. So the interview came up, and I'll take you through some of it because I do think there's some factors that are quite interesting. And I was taken into the room, which was already set up with the crew. Along the back behind me were all the seats for the MTV hierarchy, and Madonna and Liz came in. Now, Madonna did acknowledge me, but she didn't really say hello, which I found really fascinating, because I don't know whether she was in some sort of, you know, you do one interview after another. A lot of the time, pop stars are a bit grumpy at some point. I mean, it's a normal, you know, everyone's human, so that's normal. I was used to that. But she sat down and she then said, I want one light, I want it up there, and I want you. And she pointed at my boss at MTV, who had no idea what to do with a light, said, I want you to do it. So this mad thing ensued because she wanted a light come straight down on her face. And to be honest, when she said that, I thought, wow, she's really in control. She really knows exactly what she wants, how she wants to look, everything. And then the sound guy said to me, can we do a sound check? So I said, how's your day going? And she said, 1, 2, 3, is that what you want? And I started laughing, because it was partly nerves and partly because it just seemed so funny to me that she would answer in that way. So this is how the interview started. And I really believe at the time it was a sort of watershed moment in Madonna's career. So I was lucky to be there. And she talks about sexuality as being political and an artistic statement. And because I asked her whether she released Erotica at a time when America was at its sort of most conservative, moralistic. And she does say, yeah, I think the time is good. So for me, she sort of confirms this idea. And she positions her sexual expression as an act of resistance. And I think that's a really fascinating point to Madonna, because that makes her much more political. She talks about the cultural differences between Europe and America. And I think this is something that is fascinating for Americans, because in America, you know, any sexual thing is deemed as being, you know, especially at that time, is a sort of no-go area. And Europe was much more open-minded than America. I think Britain less so, but mainland Europe was. And in Europe, people really feel the music. I think that there is a difference there. And in America, they're obsessed, with scandal.
Well, speaking of scandals, well, the Brits have been quite prudish, especially around 1992. I have this beautiful item, which is the Erotica picture disc for the collectors. Obviously, it's the recent reprint. It's not the original one. You see, Steve, you know what happened? This picture, which is in the back cover of the album, was intended to be the UK release picture disc for Erotica, the song. And it was already printed and produced and ready to be released a couple of weeks after the maxi single, the standard single. But in that exact time, the wife of now disgraced Prince Andrew of Windsor from the royal house was caught by paparazzi toe-sucking her lover at the swimming pool. And in respect for the royal house, the label destroyed thousands and thousands of picture discs. Only a few hundreds of them survived out of the warehouse and got onto the black market and are extremely expensive. For the 30th, I believe, anniversary of the album, Madonna reissued this item, which is really something crazy because, again, with the Justify My Love video, if you show it to some teenager, they will go like, where's the sex? If you show sex, people will go like, oh, poetic, artistic. It's on every magazine nowadays. I have here the Japanese edition of the sex book, which is sealed. And I thought I had something very precious until a friend of mine told me, actually, it's very bad because everything is hidden. Every genitalia, every nipple is censored. So these tells us how times have changed.
Yeah, and also how things have always been viewed differently in different countries. And, you know, I think that's one thing that Madonna did actually is that she changed the sexual mores, particularly in America. She had a massive impact in America. Obviously, things are going in a completely weird direction, but she did have a massive, massive impact. And you don't really have, if you think of like the pop stars and the rock stars of the 60s, they were the ones who had an impact in society back then through their lyrics and what they stood for. And a pop artist, which essentially was, obviously how Madonna was seen at the beginning, a pop artist shouldn't really have that impact. And she did. And you even see it today, it's all the way through. So she was like framing herself as being really a little bit closer to the European sensibilities, which is sort of more relaxed and less moralizing, I suppose. She talked about the sex book. I won't really go in that. But one other thing, which really shows a side to Madonna that I didn't expect at that point, and it's probably less relevant today because of the need, but it was about the creative freedom as opposed to the corporate boundaries. Because she talks about Warner Brothers giving her limits, no religious symbols, don't use kids.
No animals.
Yeah, exactly. And she says, she claims that she never self-censored, but to me, it showed that she's not a loose cannon. She's artistic, but there is some form of calculation there as well within the framework of what boundaries are ultimately acceptable even by the corporate company that she is essentially with at that point. She does talk about the artistic fulfillment, which I think was great. She also talks about art as therapy. I mean, we all know that. You write a book, it's like getting everything out. You write a script, you're always delving into your, dark, deepest sides. And it can be quite painful, but it's really cathartic. And that's what she says, that all artistic expression is cathartic. So for her, art does have a therapeutic value. And she talks about the rawness in the music and the authenticity. And I think that's what essentially Justify My Love and Erotica show. It's particularly Erotica is very raw, isn't it? It's almost like a demo, the start of it is a record going around scratched sort of thing, and nothing is overproduced.
Yes, with Shep Pettibone, everything he said about the production of this record, and Tony Shimkin as well, was how she was specific about being raw. They did these home sessions at Shep's place with 8 tracks recorders and finished writing and pre-producing the whole album and then brought it to a studio, but she kept a lot of the original takes, vocal and musically. They just fixed it technically. She really wanted the record to be raw. I think she wanted to be honest. She wanted to be perceived, not fabricated, not candy coated, which is why she wanted to be so straightforward with the subjects she was touching.
Yeah. So in the end, I'd like to say that what I feel this interview achieved, and maybe why it was important, and it's irrelevant of me, I think, in a lot of ways. I mean, the first way, definitely, it's not to do with me. It sort of captured this cultural turning point, and within the sort of broader pop culture. So I think that's to do with the timing of it. But it also, and I think this is partly to do with my question, so I am pleased with this, because she was always redefining female agency and combining this idea of sexual empowerment with artistic expression. So I was extremely happy with that. And, I mean, I have looked at it for this, and I noticed some of the comments, which some of them are negative, but you're always going to get that. But essentially, I think it really does give a sort of view encapsulated in 1992. And that's how you have to view that interview. You have to view it in the context of the time.
If you think how things have changed since then and what was considered scandalous and what was considered forbidden at the time.
It wasn't an easy interview. It wasn't an easy interview for me, and it wasn't an easy interview for her. And I don't think any interview is easy. Interviewing Madonna, I don't think that is easy, because she, there is a power thing going on, and Madonna, I believe, uses certain techniques in the beginning to hold that power, because it's easy then to create the interview you want. And I'm a bit of a fighter, so I try and assert my power. And also, because I'm used to being, or I was used to being on TV, I don't always show my internal emotions in front of people. So I can hide the fact that I'm shitting myself inside, which I think I did very well at that time.
You did very, very well.
And when I was at the interview with Heike Makach, which isn't a great interview, the Viva interview in 1995, 95. And we went to the Warner building, and we sat in this room full of journalists. There were literally 15 different journalists in that room who were doing interviews with her that day. And she walked in the room and she screamed my name. Now, I don't know Madonna. This is someone I'd met basically professionally, She runs in the room, she screams my name. Steve runs up to me, kisses me, and then goes out the room. And all these journalists just went, "How do you know Madonna? How do you know? Are you friends with Madonna?" And they try, I'm going, "I don't know her. I have no idea who she is, really. I mean, I don't know her." And then later she came back, grabbed me with Heike, took us upstairs, and we had photos with her, which was really sweet. I mean, that was really kind of her, because she knew how important it would be to have a photo with Madonna for anyone. Yeah, and so it wasn't arranged.
I think she was grateful, because that interview that she did in 1992 gave her a platform to explain a lot of things that were being completely misunderstood, and probably originated a lot of the backlash on the sex book, because it specifically went into the artistic urge that the artist had. So now it's time for our playlist. So for every episode, we have a playlist. Some of them are available on the book, but all of them are available on Spotify, and you can find them there. The specific playlist I have created for this episode is about the Seduction songs. It's impossible to list them all. Madonna has quite specialized herself on sex and seduction, but here are some titles. You will find them there, and obviously you're very welcome to let me know in the comments if you think I should be adding a song or not, and you're absolutely free to make your own version of the playlist and play with the music. Burning Up, her first composition, was about seduction. Physical Attraction, a song that is now reckoned as her own writing and not Reggie Lucas's, is about seduction. Crazy for You, in a romantic way. Dress You Up, Into the Groove, about seduction on the dance floor. Open Your Heart, Sooner or Later, and He's a Man, from Dick Tracy. And Justify My Love, and Where Life Begins, about oral sex. Erotica. I like to remark that Justify My Love is very recurrent in Madonna's career. There are moments and hints of that song in songs like Erotica, Waiting, Veni Vidi Vici, Sex, Best Night. There is a very specific mantra that she has chosen with those words: wanting, needing, waiting. It's incredible. It's become her signature. I want to make a stop on another song that is Forbidden Love. Forbidden Love from Bedtime Stories, because there are two Forbidden Love from Madonna. And with this opportunity, I would like to discuss with you the second interview that you did with Madonna. It was in Paris to promote the Bedtime Stories album. And Forbidden Love is a song about rejection, but it's also a song about seduction in a moment when Madonna was, candy coating the fact that she was not changing subject. She was just making it subtler, but she was refusing to change because of the backlash that she was suffering. Please tell me your opinion on that and how that encounter went.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, she was refusing, and rightly so. I think, first of all, that interview for me was disappointing because it was cut short. So it wasn't the interview it was supposed to be. So I was completely thrown that, we had a much longer time, and it was completely cut short. I can't remember how long it is, but it ends up about 15 or 20 minutes or something, and it was supposed to be much longer. So I never really got to where I wanted to go because I didn't know that it was going to be cut. One thing that came out for me was the actual intensity of the pain of the backlash that she had felt, and that the pressure that must have put her under. And she's very honest in that interview when she talks about those aspects. I think in this one, in Bedtime Stories, in essence, it was very hard for her to have a massive success after Erotica because of the backlash, and she knew it. And I think she was still, it was something that sent her into massive introspection. And what's interesting about that, because she did get very internal in that interview, talking about, you know, how it affected her and how it was very difficult. And she definitely had gone into herself. And it was clearly the moment where Ray of Light was bubbling. Do you know what I mean? Because Ray of Light is a very introspective, intelligent, thoughtful, layered album. So I think an artist needs pain. That pain was unfair, but in essence, as a listener, I'm quite happy that she went through that process to create Ray of Light. Now that sounds really weird, but I think it must be, you know, it must be awful when you're the biggest star in the world, you're the focus of such hate and vitriol around the world. I think it was in that interview where she said, "What would Madonna say?" where she treated herself as a sort of
third person.
In the third person, which showed that she was very protective of who the real Madonna was. So it was like, what would the character of Madonna that I've invented reply to that? That's what it felt like. It was either that one or Erotica. You know, I get bits and pieces muddled up.
That's wonderful. That's really witty. Just bear with me as I finish reading through the list for the listeners. After Forbidden Love, you will find I Want You, the beautiful song she did with Massive Attack from Marvin Gaye. I'd Be Surprisingly Good for You from Evita is a very seductive song. Skin, which originally from the Ray of Light album was called Flirtation Dance. Impressive Instant, Future Lovers, Candy Shop, Inside Out, Best Night that we have already mentioned, Body Shop, where there's this irony about the mechanics and love and sex, 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 the song, Medellin, Crave, and so many others. Well, Steve, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. I am very happy to have had this special episode with you because you have given us an enlightenment on Madonna as a conversation point, as a person to talk to that none of us get to see. I've had the privilege myself organizing a few interviews, and I totally see the truth in many of the things that you said, and I'm glad we are sharing it with so many viewers. So thank you so much for this. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's really nice to be able to talk about that particular era, and particularly about Madonna, who was so important to me, not only growing up in essence, but also professionally. So thanks a lot.
That's awesome. Once again, because what I've just said about Steve, everybody go see Pop the History Makers with Steve Blame. It's an incredible podcast with many, many, many artists that you will be fond of or interested in hearing stories about. Thank you, Steve, again. And to the listeners, please stay tuned. I have an important announcement or two. I'm thankful to Steve Blame for sharing his articulate thoughts and his memories. Also, what a fascinating subject, Madonna seduction songs. I think we could have a whole other episode or two about that. Please let me know your thoughts with your comments on your streaming platform or DMs on Instagram. It means a lot to me having a direct exchange with other Madonna fans. Now, before we say goodbye, I have a special announcement or two. I'm working on something special for Madonna's birthday. So keep an eye on Madonna Songbook on Instagram. I can't say more for now, but there's a cute thing we're making to celebrate her birthday with my book. And finally, a preview on the next episode. Around Madonna's birthday, I will also be releasing the final episode of this first season of Madonna Songbook podcast. And I have a very, very special guest joining me, Keith Caulfield from Billboard magazine, coming to share all the stories and details behind Madonna's cover songs. Yes, on Madonna Songbook, it's all about her music. Leave the chatter behind and let the music take control.